Hi guys, this is an update on where I'm at on the RCA. A few things I want to go over. Something that I kind of ran across. I think I've noticed it before, but I never really paid that close attention until now. First, before I do that, we've got the bottom chassis, power supply chassis, painted. I went ahead and shot some stuff, primer over this area here where they had left it open before, and then got her painted up. Now, in that chassis was this plug, these two plugs, the power cord plugged in there using this. Went to the power cord, and of course at the other end you had just your standard acorn. One thing about those, if you ever wondered about, if you stick wires in here, a new cord or something, it's got a lot of slop in it, so you have to come up with some means to kind of get some sort of strain relief in these. You ever wondered how they used to do it in the old days? Well, basically what they had was, I got this one in backwards, but it was something of that nature. It was a rubber piece that was molded on that fit the hole tight, and there would have been a strain relief on here, but it didn't want to come out without it just breaking up, because when it was rubber, before it turned to rock, it would have slid down in past the prongs real easy. But what it looked like is this type of strain relief, and then they came down. This would hold it in. This came out of this part here, and they'd fit down inside like that, and then this part fills in the hole. Now, the radio was built in 1929, and something I want to show you is, although the plugs themselves, the male plugs, are not polarized, here's this, the females are definitely. Here's off my glue gun, modern day plug, wide prong on the neutral, narrow on the hot, so you can only plug it in one way. Well, it definitely plugs in to these, but if you turn it over you can't plug it in. They're narrow on one side, wide on the other, just like a polarized plug. This is the plug off the cord that would plug onto the chassis. It has got a wide spot here and a narrow one there so that it can be plugged in, but you cannot plug it in both ways. And then on this here is a standard dual outlet of the period, around mid-20s. You can see it very clearly that it's wide. And then it's got this one here, which is actually the same brand as this guy. It's the same thing, exactly. Now, of course, I pulled these out to paint the chassis. The one reason that, of course, I was getting the cord worked up and trying to get rid of the fray parts and stuff. Most of the cord's in pretty good shape, but towards the ends there were some frayed areas and hard areas. What I got this for is the transformers I put in, the radio that they were out of originally, the power supply, had a ballast. So, and there's the ballast right there. And I had originally thought about, or at least entertained the idea of rewiring this to extent, well, it actually is rewired, or could be rewired, and plugging the ballast in, because it just plugs in one of these plugs. But then I got thinking about that. It's going to be awful close to the audio transformers, and although from the paint on it, it shows that most of the heat goes up. I'd just rather not be on the chassis, so I got this, and this I can mount in the cabinet. There's plenty of room in the cabinet, and I can just plug it in. That's actually the plug that was used on, and run a wire out of here to the chassis. Now, the reason why I want this here will be going to full power, and the purpose of that is this reduces the voltage down to about 80 volts to the primaries, but the turntable requires a minimum of 100 volts. It can run from 100 to 125, but anything less than 100, it's going to run too slow. So I can't just use this and run everything. So I can plug the turntable in here and it'll get full power and of the wall outlet, and then use the ballast for the transformers. Now, a few other things. Let's see. Got the cans restuffed. The only two real cans that was on here. There was 3 .25s in this one. This goes on the RF chassis, tuner chassis, and then this came out of here. This had the line filters in it, .1s, and I put 2 safety caps in there. And what came out of it was these guys, which is kind of nice. This one here has a date code on it of July 17th, 1979. 1 second. Sorry about the interruption. I had to answer the phone. I'm back. So anyway, it's July 16th, 1929. So it gives a good date code. That was what was being used for the line filters, and then this is the 3.25s that came out. Both these were wrapped in paper like this, and they just slid out pretty darn easily out of the cans. And a few other things. I was talking about when it's all done and maybe having to do the neutralization. I went over that in the last video about where they told you to cut off a pin off of a good 26 tube. And then they talked about making an adapter. Well, I made one up. It's just an old socket that came off of a tube that was bad. And then I had a tube socket, female. Attached 3 wires, brought them through and soldered them in. One filament is open like they want, and then it just fits in like so. So I can, that way I can unplug each individual 26 that needs section that needs to be neutralized, plug it in here, do the neutralization of that section, and then plug that tube back in here, and that's the best way of doing it. So anyway, here's the sockets that go in there. They're just one large band. I kind of shined them up a little bit, polished them a little bit. So then I'll be just re-putting them back in. I have to work out these grounds, but they're over in this area here. There's a place I can get a ground, so I'll probably use something like this wire here, which is awful close, and just daisy chain the grounds in and then bring it over and hook it up, and it won't be so noticeable. It'll match out pretty darn good, and get that all fastened back in. I want to let this dry a little bit longer. Let's see. Now, a few other things. While this was after I painted it and was setting and drying it and the transformers and everything, I've been working on a few other things on the radio. And one of the things I've been doing is I got into cleaning up, trying to clean up the tuner chassis, and ended up just pretty much taking it down, completely dismantling it for the most part. I wanted to get this off and get it cleaned up, this part of the tuning arm, and get it lubed, so now it moves pretty darn easily. I did leave these coils on. Well, this is transformer, and then these two RF chokes, mainly because I don't have anything to refasten them with, both either in rivet. I don't have rivets that long, but also they need to be brass to have no effect on the coils, because you're going right down through the cores. But I had to get some of this cleaned up around here, some rust and stuff, and then I will coat that probably with either some clear or put some a little layer of WD-40 on there or something to keep it from rusting again. That's that side, and then here's this side. The coils and everything and the sockets are off. But when I get ready to start putting this back together, I'll show how at least one of these go in. These shafts still need to be cleaned up. They're kind of got a little bit of not so much rust, just dried grease, so they're a little rough, and I want to clean them up a little bit. And while I did that, also the top piece I had to work on a little bit, and then I cleaned it up and shined it up. That it's got a few little blemishes in it from where there's some rust on it, but one thing I had to do to it was was the fact that they had replaced the volume control, which sets in here, and for whatever reasons they did that, where the wires attached on, instead of putting the new one in the same way the old one was, which is having the connection pointing almost straight down, they set them in this way. And now I don't know if that was, maybe they felt better that way as far as the knob. I can't remember if these knobs, I haven't actually looked at them, if they've got a little dot on them showing where, when you're turning them or not. But anyway, they left it up towards this direction, which would hit this metal, so they ended up going in here and bending the heck out of this metal so that it came across and went straight down, kind of like this. This is all bent outward like this so that it wouldn't intervene. I straightened it the best I could, because a lot of the metal has been stretched when they did that, but it's about as close as it's going to get with the tools I've got. But it's a lot better than what it was. Now, as far as the parts on here and how they fit in, you have your caps, which set in like this, which will go over these bolt holes here, and then go down, and then they hook onto here. There's a couple spacers that hold these at a certain distance apart. These two connections here are for the hook to the coils. These are spring loaded. That's what gives some spring to this thing so it works the way it should. And then this rides against the, this roller does, against the other side there, the hub, and that's for fine tuning. That's why all the screws are in there when you look at it from the other side. All these screws, what they are doing is they screw into and they push out this copper piece, and it's spring loaded. I don't know if you can see that right there. That holds it tight, and then adjust these for it basically like a fine tuning of the capacitor to get it just set just right so that they're all working in unison. And those then of course correspond with the coil pack. You just got a coil, which is not real easy to take off of the rest of it. I do a little more dusting on it. The resistor is good. It checks exactly what the schematic says it's supposed to. This is the trimmer that you do for neutralization, and then there's a dual cap in here that's going across the secondary of the coil, and that's just as a decoupling cap. And you got your primary winding here and then the secondary here. Now, and I can't remember now because I actually did a pretty decent job of fixing it, but one of these, when I was looking at it before I even pulled them out, one of these pins down in here was all bent out of shape, and it'll probably be easier to see on one of the other sockets, the empty sockets that don't have a coil on them. But these, they're hooked on this side, goes to this post here and this post here, and they come up and then they make a bend around and they come back down, and then they're just hooked into place. It's got a little, you probably never will see it, but there's a little bit of a bend down in there that just kind of locks them into place. That was pulled loose and pulled clear up, and the rest of the bend was bent back. And of all places underneath one of the coils, it happened to be this one here, but I don't know if this is the socket, but I had to work it back down in there and then spread it out so that get it all spread out so it'd stay and locked in place. And when it was still in there, I could have told you which one it was, but then I checked it with a tube to make sure it wouldn't shove back out, and it didn't. Now, on the schematic, you know, we talked about a little bit on the power supply what I had to do to get the biasing resistor, since I didn't have a center tap for the 45s, and I talked about putting two 10 ohms across to give it a full 20 ohms across there, and then tapping at the center, and then that tap would go to the biasing resistor. Well, the 26s in the RF, they're also biased from the cathodes. They use a single biasing resistor and a 20 ohm center tap going across the filaments. That's this thing right here. This is the 20 ohms here, 10 on each side. This would hook across the filaments, and then the biasing resistor hooks to the center tap and goes to ground. And that's how they did it back in the day. So I thought I'd show that to you. Now, a few other little, well, let's see, a couple things I was thinking about, I want to tell you about. Well, one thing has to do with anytime you work on anything is to know the schematic. Study it first before you ever do any tearing down or anything, removing anything, replacing any parts, doing any testing, doing anything, is to know your schematic. And I thought we'd kind of go through the schematic on here, because it is a relatively simple schematic, and I thought maybe I'd just bring the camera up and get it kind of centered there. Maybe zoom in just a little bit. And Then what I can do is zoom this in. So the first thing we'll do is we're just going to follow the signal through and talk about how everything works and stuff. Now, and I'll kind of show you some of the various parts. Right off the bat, the first thing is, you remember this little can here. I said it had the 3.25s in it, capacitors. Well, they're right here. Let me get a better pointer. C7. This one, and this one. So that's that can there. R8, which is right here and right here. It's a dual potentiometer, has two pots on it. That's the volume control. Now, TRF radios are not quite like super heterodyne radios and stuff, where the volume control is actually controlling the signal input into the first audio on its grid, the first preamp or first audio tube. Instead, the audio section is running at full bore, so it's like maxed out volume. The way they're controlling volume primarily is by adjusting the signal strength that's coming in the antenna. If you turn the volume up, which they show an arrow for doing that, you decrease the resistance here, so you get a stronger signal coming into the first tube in the grid. Consequently, it gets louder. And it's kind of like if you had a radio on your bench, a regular radio that needs an external antenna. It can be a super heterodyne, but if you set the volume at a certain level, playing high enough or even near full volume, but no antenna hooked to it, now you might pick up some of your surrounding noise. And if you live in a city with a couple close by radio stations, if you're tuned in on them, you might pick them up. But if you're out of ways or you don't have too much noise going on, like computers, lights, and stuff of that nature, you won't hear a whole lot. Maybe a little static, but that's about it. But if you put your finger on the antenna terminal, and if you're tuned into a radio station, it'll come in fairly loud. And the longer the antenna, the better the antenna you put on there, the louder it gets. Same basic principle is what they're doing here. And this one here, what it's doing is as the signal goes through, of course it builds a field. Anyway, some of that field cuts across on this other actual secondary, which is hooked to ground, but not both sides of it. The other side is actually going through the pot here on this one, which is acting as rheostat. As you increase the volume, you increase in resistance, which allows this to work. But the main thing is it doesn't take that signal, part of that signal, to ground. It keeps it away from ground so it can go on through the radio. If you bring this up here, you make a solid loop that goes right to ground, so what gets impressed on here is going to ground. It actually draws down the signal and takes it to ground, so it reduces the volume or signal on through the radio. Now these guys here, you see R5. R5 is, if I can bring it on the camera and you can see it, R5 is that resistor I said that was good. And of course, C2 up here is this cap. Get it in the camera. There we go. This is C2. That's that trimmer cap. And of course the coils, the transformers here. Now, these 5 tubes, all hooked to the same filament line going back to the plug. And there's that, what I showed you, that R1, that wire wound resistor, and then the little red resistor dog bone that's connected off it that would hook to ground. There's that biasing resistor there. This one over here is a hum control. It just goes right to ground to help control any hum that might be in the 27 on its line, and reduce any hum coming through the radio as well from these. You got to remember, your filaments are AC, so you got to reduce hum someplace, and that's what they're doing here. This is a 27 detector. It uses a grid leak arrangement for the grid. It is the size of the parts are adjusted, the capacitor and resistor, to make this set the bias point on this to act as a diode, so that it only lets through the positive going part. The negative going part, the tube will be in full cutout of the wave as it goes through here. So, and the way it works basically is when you first turn on the radio, a signal starts coming through. There's a voltage drop across the resistor, which charges the cap, and when it goes the other way, the cap doesn't get a chance to discharge as much, and each wave that goes through keeps charging it until it gets to a happy medium. And once it gets to that point, that'll become, the charge on the cap becomes the biasing for the grid. C5 is a 0.001. It's more or less a tone control. Just kind of cutting some tones that's in there. This is a choke. What this is for is to block out any RF that'll be on that gets through the tube. Block it out, but let the audio through. Right here, then it goes through. This is that switch that's on the front of the radio for a record or radio. It's set in radio right now, so it feeds down through here, comes back out, and goes into the first input transformer, primary, to feed the first audio. If you flip to record, then here's the pickup, you know, the needle and the pickup on the record player. It has its own volume control. There's a volume control on the record player, and it feeds a signal through that. That comes down, comes through here, and goes through a different primary on the same transformer. And the reason for the difference is the signal coming out of here is quite a bit stronger than what this is going to produce. So in order for this to work, since this is fairly low voltage, they wanted to have a step up in this transformer, so that's what they have a different, it has a different winding ratio to step it up to get it stronger, so you have good sound when you're playing a record. So that's the whole purpose of the dual primaries on that transformer, which is kind of hard to find a transformer like that, and they can be a weak spot on these radios. Of course, you got your power transformer and its various different windings, and there's C6, that other cap I showed you, and showed you the date codes on, right here, the line filter caps. So each side, you notice they go to ground. They're going from each side of the line. Here's where the line plugs in. One side goes to ground here, and the other one goes through the switch. When it comes back from the switch, it goes through here. So both sides have a cap that's going to ground. Ground's vitally important, especially on a TRF, but any radio that has an external antenna and a ground, they really need the ground hooked up for two reasons. One, if they do have a filter like this, line filter, and a lot of them do, without hooking ground up, there's no place to take that signal through, that noise. So all it does is just go in the chassis and just stay in the radio. If you got ground hooked up, it has a place to go. it'll go back to earth and bleed off there, getting it away from the radio so the radio's a little more quieter. The other reason for ground is if you go back to your antenna connection, you notice that the antenna, and you can't notice that. Let me rotate this just a little bit. Okay. Again, there's the volume control. But the antenna has ground here and then the aerial here. You have your connections. You have to have really to get the strongest signal, you have to have that ground hooked to earth ground. From the chassis to the earth, you know. So you need the ground hooked up to, actually it's basically making a complete circuit for your antenna, for your aerial, to feed the signal into the radio. So those are the two reasons to actually have the a ground. Now, typical power supply, there's a secondary hum control on the 26, again working the same way as what was on the 27 and reducing any more hum that is both in the 26 and that could be coming through. Of course, the the filament winding connected through R4 at the center tab for the bias resistor for the 45s. It's typical push-pull. Tone controls here with a tone control capacitor. Of course, your interstage transformer, output transformer. These radios, being that they're running the audio at full bore, there's nothing to reduce the audio signal. Then they wanted to make sure that there is as little buzz and hum that can be in the radio. So consequently, they have a lot of times either fixed or adjustable hum controls or hum elimination. But they also make use of at least usually two chokes. There's a power supply choke here. It's individual filter caps. But then over here in the speaker, they're making use of the field coil also as another choke. So it's a dual pi circuit where you have a capacitor, choke, capacitor, choke, and then capacitor to give the best filtering and reduce the maximum amount of hum that's in the B+, so that you don't hear it coming out of the 45s. Now the nice thing about the information on this schematic here, this is the service manual that I was lucky enough to find and be able to download. This one actually has the transformer numbered, connections numbered, and you can also, even though on the riders it's got this numbering system here, but it's not as easily to read. It's on the plug, on that umbilical plug that plugs one chassis to the other. Plus they also got the capacitor numbers here that are on the capacitor can. They also have the transformers, the audio transformer numbers, which are all on these cans. They all got the numbers showing on them, which makes it really nice. And then of course in this they also have a full wiring diagram of both chassis. This is the bottom chassis. You can see the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and so on to up to 17. The can condenser filter pack is 1, 2, 3, 4, and again the audio transformers all have numbers on them. So it makes it kind of nice on this. But no matter what kind of information you get to know your schematic and get to know how everything hooks up. It's really vitally important both for working on the radio as well as troubleshooting the radio if you need to troubleshoot it. This is a road map to where you're going. It's a road map that shows from the antenna all the way through the radio to the speaker, how the signal gets there. And it's your roadmap to understanding your radio. So it really study the schematic, learn pretty good to understand where everything's at and how it hooks up before you even start to work on any restoration project of any radio or TV. That's about all I got. Of course, power switch here and light, various different other little components there. That's about all I got on this. So I think I'll probably end this video here. In the next video, we'll work on getting showing you how you put the tuning condensers back on the chassis. I'll probably start working on getting the power supply audio amplifier chassis put back together, and we'll go from there. So I want to thank my new subscribers. I want to thank you for your comments, everybody. Yeah, I want to thank you for watching, and just keep watching. There's more to come on this as we go through it, and I'll probably have a few other little tips and stuff as just to kind of put in there as we go through. So I'll see you guys on the next video, and you have a good day. Thanks.